What happens when a classic band takes a decade and a half to craft one of the most anticipated albums of all time? Let's find out.
Why don't you just fuck off?
Guns N' Roses are one of the biggest bands of all time. They were arguably the last hard rock band of their kind, the last band to truly embody sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and all the nastiness that comes with it. Band who seemed to revel in their own excess and self-destruction. They were dangerous, frightening, and didn't care what anyone thought. But people seem to forget that they didn't last in their classic state for very long. Their debut classic album, Appetite for Destruction, is a sleazy and disgusting romp. It's an ode to decadence and decay. They sound like they're about to fall apart at any moment and are running on a diet of heroin and cheap liquor. And it's great. It's a monumental record that married elements of 70s glam rock and hair metal into a lethal cocktail. I'm admittedly really burnt out on the singles, but tracks like My Michelle, Think About You, You're Crazy, It's So Easy, Out to Get Me, and Mr. Brownstone are as vital today as they were in 1987. It's one of those records that's really hard to sum up in a sentence or two because it resists that kind of analysis. And even though it was a slow seller at first, it slowly but surely climbed up the charts, catapulted GNR into the stratosphere, and eventually went diamond. They followed Appetite with their double EP, Lies, with side 1 consisting of the independently released Live Like a Suicide, and on the second side the band went unplugged and featured a more somber and tender version of the band with the hit Patience, which showed Guns N' Roses weren't a one-trick pony. But they also landed themselves into the first of many controversies for the track 1 in a Million, for some pretty obvious reasons.
Police and niggas, that's right, get out of my way.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. But that's only the first verse, maybe after that.
Immigrants and faggots.
Oh god dang it. Then in 1990 they had no choice but to fire their drummer Steven Adler for his substance abuse problems. In a band full of raging drug addicts, Steven was ousted for his addictions. The guy was hardcore, what else can I say? And in my opinion, this was the first nail of many in GNR's coffin. Steven was such an important member of the band because he, along with Duff McKagan, was responsible for the monstrous and sleazy groove that made Appetite for Destruction as great as it was. He was replaced by human drum machine Matt Sorum, and in 1991 they released 2 albums, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. And at the time it was huge and hit 1 and 2 on the charts respectively, but it hasn't aged that well in my opinion. There's nearly 3 hours of music, and a lot of it should have been left on the cutting room floor. For every estranged Civil War or 14 years, we have 3 or 4 songs like Back Off Bitch and Fucking My World.
You want to step into my world? It's a socio-psychotic state of bliss.
Then, not long after, founding rhythm guitarist and prominent songwriter Izzy Stradlin decided to leave, citing Axl's diva-like behavior, Axl trying to demote him to a hired gun, and becoming sober. The band then released a punk covers album, The Spaghetti Incident, which is just awful. Why record a bunch of classic punk rock songs with a glossy and overproduced sound? Talk about an oxymoron. Then, before the 90s was over, both Slash and Duff left, leaving Axl as the lone surviving original member. The band, formerly known as Guns N' Roses, then contributed a song to the End of Days soundtrack called Oh My God, with an entirely new lineup, which we'll get to later, and it was a completely new sound. If nothing else, you can't claim that Guns N' Roses are resting on their laurels. Well, the band is hardly GNR anymore anyways, let's be honest here.
Oh my God, I can't deny this. I've been trying just to kill and fight this.
The song trades in their hard rock sound with an industrial stomp. And honestly, it's not terrible. I kind of like it. I know a lot of people hate this song, and I can understand why, but I can't help but enjoy the batshit ride the song takes you on. Axl sounds as good as ever, and he pulls off a sound like this pretty well. He doesn't sound like a fish out of water. And in 2002, the band made one of their first live appearances in years on the MTV VMA Awards, and were then going to go on tour with their new lineup, tentatively titled The Chinese Democracy Tour, which would also be the name of the forthcoming album that had reportedly been in production since 1994. Back when Duff and Slash were still in the band. And on the aforementioned VMAs, a song due to be on Chinese Democracy, Madagascar, was part of the 3-song medley, along with Welcome to the Jungle and Paradise City. And my god, we need to talk about this. This was the first time people had seen this band in the flesh for many years, and you can imagine their surprise when the curtains lifted and everyone let out a collective, who the fuck are these guys? The new lineup took everyone by surprise, and not in a good way. And they played fine, nothing wrong with their performances, but Slash's image defined the band in the mainstream as much as Axl did, and Axl's new look ain't doing him any favors. And his voice, yeesh. The fact that Axl sounds this crappy is a bit of a problem. The rest of the band sound fine, but by this point Axl was the only person most people cared about. He was Guns N' Roses. And no, Dizzy Reed does not fucking count. And when he's this out of breath and sounds downright anemic, it's a bit of an issue. And it's funny when you pay attention to the crowd, because during Welcome to the Jungle, everyone is into it. When they start playing Madagascar, everyone's zoning out. And on Paradise City, everyone is into it again. It's not because Madagascar is necessarily bad, I'll talk about my feelings of it later, but it really missed the mark here. They should have played something like Sweet Child or You Could Be Mine instead. Or if they wanted to play a new song, they could have played something more up-tempo. But regardless of the mediocre at best performance and the bad press surrounding it, SNL even parodied it on its waning years of relevance with Matt Damon, people were anticipating a new album. But little did fans know they would be waiting for this album for many years to come. And just think about it, imagine being a fan waiting for this album to finally release. Now I'm far removed from that experience, I was only 9 when it came out, and as a kid I was a huge fan of GNR, but it didn't go much further than watching some of the videos on VHS with my dad and listening to Appetite. I wasn't exactly reading each new edition of classic rock, eagerly awaiting for news regarding the album. At that age I was more concerned with the new season of Ben 10. And when it came out my dad bought it, and I just thought, oh, new Guns N' Roses album. And that was it. I was completely detached. So imagine being an avid fan of this band since at least the early 90s. The last proper studio album was Use Your Illusion 91. Okay, cool. Then we have the covers album, The Spaghetti Incident in 93. Cool, so when's a new album? Then they did Oh My God in 98. Great, so when's a new album? Then they announced the Chinese Democracy Tour in 2001. Great, so when's a new album? They then played a new song, Madagascar, at the VMAs in 2002. Great, so when's a new album? In 2005, Mike Piazza leaked the demo for a new song, IRS. Cool, so when's a new album? And after so many false promises, and after the band was on the Chinese Democracy Tour for almost a decade, people started to lose hope. Funnily enough, Dr. Pepper said in March of 2008 that they would give everyone in North America a free can of soda if Chinese Democracy actually released that year, with the exception of Slash and Buckethead for some reason. And what do you know? That's what got the album to finally release. How hilarious is that? How much money you want to bet Axl just saw that headline and said, oh, I'll show you motherfuckers. And unsurprisingly, Dr. Pepper bitched out and only allowed one day for people to go to their site and retrieve a coupon for a free soft drink. But shock of shocks, the site just so happened to not work that day. They said their site crashed and some people did actually receive coupons, but I call bullshit. Fucking 1%. And the band's lawyers went out of their way to threaten to sue Dr. Pepper's parent company, saying, and I quote, "The redemption scheme your company clumsily implemented for this offer was an unmitigated disaster, which defrauded consumers and in the eyes of vocal fans, ruined Chinese Democracy's release." To which Axl responded with this when he found out. Wait, what? But enough of the backstory of this album. God, this is gonna be a long video. Now, the only way for me to really do this album justice is to go track by track. Trust me, it's necessary. Also, keep in mind, within the past decade or so, I've only heard this record a handful of times, but I am very familiar with it. Because as mentioned before, my dad bought it when it came out, and he liked it and played it a lot. So keep in mind there may be some bias in one way or another regarding some of these tracks, so fair warning. But anyway, let's just get right into it with the opening track, only single, title track, Chinese Democracy. And if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, thanks, bye. The first track on the album really makes you wait for it to finally kick in, with weird atmospheric sounds and percussion at the start, and that lone isolated riff to really make you beg for it. This album may have taken over a decade, and they don't care to make you wait longer, and I love that. In fact, it takes a good 90 seconds until you even hear Axl's voice. And what a way to reintroduce yourself. In fact, just the way it explodes is such a pleasure to the ears. Now, keep in mind that opening scream is the most Axl-like you'll probably get for this track, because he mainly sticks to his low-toned voice for the song, but it's still really cool. The rhythm section is killing it on this song. It's pummeling and powerful. Frank is pounding those skins like they owe him money. He doesn't do much in terms of fancy fills and such, but what he does play, he plays with conviction. Same goes for Tommy Stinson. Wait, Tommy Stinson? Yeah, Tommy Stinson from The Replacements. My favorite band of all time. and Guns N' Roses. That's kinda odd. That's like Michael Stipe joining Whitesnake, but he plays his ass off, and I also enjoy his backing vocals on the song and album. Axl said he wrote this song after watching the film Kundun about the life of Tenzin Gyatso, so sorry for that mispronunciation, and it inspired him to write a song largely about the Chinese government and how corrupt and oppressive it is. Which, yeah, I know, all governments are like that, government be bad and such, but China's government is objectively worse than most. For example, there's currently a genocide happening against the Uyghur Muslims by the hands of the Chinese government. There's a lot to criticize, let's put it that way. And Axl said that it isn't supposed to be a quote intelligent song, it isn't meant to answer any questions. It's a very complex issue that affects over 1 billion people. And if you wanted Axl fucking Rose to be your moral guiding light and give you the secret to stopping arguably the most powerful and corrupt governments in the world, that's your problem. So yeah, I really love this song. For an album so many hates, this song is one of the band's best. Sure, it's nothing like classic material by this band, and you can argue Axl shouldn't have used the Guns N' Roses name, and yeah, this album is very much overproduced, I agree, but a production that was worked on for over a decade, I'm not surprised that it sounds this way. But I don't see why this album gets such a bad reputation. Nah, I like this song too. It's not as good as the title track, but I can't say I hate it. This song has a very electronic vibe to it, and when you find out guitarist Robin Fink, who has an on-again, off-again relationship with Nine Inch Nails, co-wrote it makes more sense. Also, Moby at one point was attached to produce this album way back in the day, along with Youth, Mike Klink, who produced every GNR album prior, and even Roy Thomas fucking Baker. And it also isn't too surprising because, oh my god, their last studio release prior to this was also very industrial, and Axl's been very open about what an influence Trent Reznor has had on him. But the electronic elements are very forceful in this track, and they overpower the other instruments to an extent, especially Axl's voice. And even though there's other electronic elements on this album to be found, this song has more than every other track combined, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. But it's a good song, and I like the menacing verses and the chorus that's really catchy. Then we have Better. I've always adored this song, since the first time I ever heard it. It's really hard to pull off a mid-tempo song this well. It's never plodding, there's tons of different sections, and it never stays in the same place for too long. There's always something new thrown into the mix. The main riff and the almost hip-hop type beat is an instant earworm. The pre-chorus and chorus are both punishing, the former is more melancholic, and the latter is Axl spitting venom through the mic. If Axl's swaggering presence throughout the verse didn't give you an idea of the pain the song holds for him, the bridge contains maybe Axl's most pissed off and most visceral performance of his entire career. He lets it all hang out, and he doesn't give a fuck what anyone thinks. And the guitar solos on this track are amazing. I know Buckethead did the more shreddy solo, and it's Buckethead if I've ever heard him. This is proof that he could shred with soul and feeling. And the more bluesy solo is from Robin Fink, and it's probably the best piece of guitar work to be found on this entire record. Yeah, Better is amazing. I highly recommend you give this song a shot if you've never heard it. I can't wait for what's next.
All the love in the world couldn't save you.
And you fucked it! You fucking fucked it!
Yeah, we're fucked.
We had some good momentum from the first 3 tracks, but the minute those pianos come to the picture, run. The album drops off a cliff at this point and never really gets its footing again. I hope you enjoyed the hard rocking songs that came previously, because you'll see very little of that again. In this song in question, Street of Dreams isn't the worst thing I guess. Axl sounds nice and it picks up a bit by the end, and I could see myself maybe liking it if it had more going on with it. Because when I listen to this, all I hear is an inferior version of November Rain. But unlike November Rain, it doesn't have that monster crescendo and Slash's solos. In general, it just sounds stock, like he made an AI listen to all of GNR's ballads and told it to write another one. The song is 4.5 minutes and feels like an eternity. Unlike November Rain, which is a long song to begin with an hour that actually goes somewhere, so it earns its grandiose and slightly pompous stature. And Street of Dreams does not do any of that. The album continues to go off the deep end with the almost trip-hop of In the World. I don't hate it, but it feels like a puzzle with all the pieces in different order, and someone trying to make them fit without adjusting them. There's flamenco guitars, a somewhat funky vibe, almost inaudible guitars with wah effects on them, The high gain riffs all mixed together with actual shriek. None of it fits, it doesn't go anywhere, and it just gets on my nerves. There was a time wait a minute. Nice. Unfortunately, I don't have much else to get excited for with this track. If Street of Dreams is November Light, the song is a strange light. Not just musically, but even lyrically the similarities. Though it's not a total bust, I like how the chorus amplifies things a bit, and there's some interesting sections here or there. But why would I listen to this song when I can just listen to Estranged? Who's gonna pick this song over Estranged? I'll tell you who, fucking no one. Then we have Catcher in the Rye. I'm sorry, but this reminds me of Creed and a lot of that 2000s butt rock. Case in point. It's just boring and lifeless. There's nothing here and actually sounds whiny in this song. I could hear Motley Crue recording this during their Generation Swine or New Tattoo sessions. Even some decent guitar solos near the end of this track can't save it from painful mediocrity. I've had enough of the slow jams and the ballads, man. We're 7 tracks in, we haven't had any energy since track 3. Come on, Axl, give me something. I'm begging ya.
Whoa, what?
Now, all jokes aside with that weird intro, Scraped actually isn't half bad. It's no better or Chinese Democracy, but this song has more of a reason to be here than any redos of other GNR songs, I can tell you that much. I like the vocal layering, the drums, and the distressing state of the song. Honestly, in my opinion, this song isn't too far removed from Appetite for Destruction. It's obviously not exact, but I hear a lot of elements of classic Guns in this track. So yeah, decent song. Nothing amazing, and I may not give it a pass if it was on a much better album, but oh well. Riot and Bedouins is an alright song, I guess, but the more interesting thing about it is that they got sued for the opening sounding too similar to 2 compositions by Ulrich God fucking damn it, this song and made up words like Ulrich. And when you listen to those songs and the intro of Riot and fuck, it's at least slightly sus. But the song is just whatever. It's nice to finally get some more up-tempo momentum, but the songwriting just isn't there, and it's super forgettable. Sorry is not bad? Holy shit, a ballad off this album I kinda like. It has more going on with it than other ballads off this record. I really like how dour the verse is combined with a massive sounding chorus, which sounds like a wrecking ball crashing through your speakers. I also love the lyrics, the guitar work, Axl's croon, even though his delivery on this line is kinda funny. But I don't want to do it. But it's super whiny, and it's no Sweet Child of Mine, I'll tell you that much. Then we have IRS, which is okay. I like the chorus and the bridge fine enough, and Buckethead really delivers with his solo, and I just wish it was longer. But everything surrounding it leaves a lot to be desired. As decent as the song is, it does not sound like they were working on this for over 10 years. Madagascar are snippets from speeches from Martin Luther King sampled within it, and because of that, MLK got a songwriting credit on this, which is kind of hilarious. But as for the song, Axl sounds like Joe Cocker, and I feel they do too much for the slow tempo verse, and as soon as it starts to pick up, it drops back down to that verse, which I think is just lame. Also, why have the MLK snippets here to begin with? From what I can tell, it has nothing to do with MLK or anything he fought for, it just makes the sample sound hollow and pointless, which in my opinion is just an insult to MLK's legacy. Keep MLK away from the song, Axl, what did he ever do to you? Second to last song, we're almost there, boys. And it's another ballad. Again, I sound like a broken record. It's not horrible, I could see myself liking it maybe in a different context, but by this point, majority of the album has been either ballads, slow jams, or weird experimentation. There's only so many Axl ballads I can take in one sitting, guys. This album is well over an hour, and it's really easy to get sick of. Axl, to quote Todd in the Shadows, "Stop feeling. I revoke your right to have feelings." This is Guns N' Roses, man. Where's the danger? I'm not expecting Appetite Part 2. That's not fair. But I do expect a Guns N' Roses album to sound like Guns N' Roses. Is that too much to ask for? Am I being unreasonable here? Okay, last track, Prostitutes. I'm glad to say I actually like this one. It's triumphant, epic in scope, and has a good crescendo, and I love the strings and synths that this album and song ends on. It works great as a final track, and I wish more songs of this album felt this magnificent, but as much as I dig it, it's too little too late by this point. Ever since Better, which was track 3, this album went off a cliff and was never able to pick itself back up. There's some tracks I also enjoy, like this one, but it's not enough for me to recommend it to just about anyone. Guns N' Roses fans won't like it because it's hardly a Guns N' Roses album, and non-Guns N' Roses fans won't like it because most of it will just bore them to tears. Also, it's a Guns N' Roses album. I've seen a lot of people defend this album in hindsight, and I can understand why. It's truly a unique album, and the fact that it was even released in the end is a triumph on its own, but it's really not worth the wait. And it's arguable no album's worth that wait, to be fair. Spin Magazine said the only way for this album to live up to the hype was for it to never release to begin with. And I kind of agree. And to leave your fans waiting for over a decade only to release an album that is at best average and at worst a painful bore just makes it sting all the more. On top of that, the reason why I didn't bother reading out the new lineup was because it just changed so much. From the time they started development to this album to it actually coming out, the lineup changed more times than I can even count. So there's numbers of musicians on this record, including Axl Rose, obviously on vocals, Robin Fink, Bumblefoot, Paul Tobias, and Richard Fortus on guitar, Brian Brain Mantia and Frank Furrer on drums, Dizzy Reed and Chris Pittman on keyboards, only Tommy Stinson on bass. Hey, you did it all by yourself, good job Tommy. And Josh Freese, who actually brought Tommy into the band to begin with and played with Guns for a little while himself, is credited on arrangements on some tracks. So the band hardly has a consistent lineup, even in the studio. There's not a whole lot of chemistry between musicians, they were glorified session guys, which makes this album feel more like an Axl Rose solo record than it already is. And that's not even including all the actual session musicians and production credits this album has. There's tens of them. And at the end of the day, the album didn't even do that great. Sure, it went to number 3 on the charts and went platinum, but it shipped platinum. It went platinum the same way the Kiss solo albums went platinum. And even if it did sell 1 million copies, that probably wasn't enough to recoup the $13 million it took to record this album. $13 million, making it the second most expensive album ever behind Michael Jackson's Invincible. And on top of that, it was banned in China. Because of course it was. Critical reception wasn't much better. It left fans and critics stumped at release, and even today it's regarded as a total flop and a lame record that wasn't deserving the band's name. But surprisingly enough, most of the former members of GNR had positive things to say about it, including Slash, Duff, and Izzy. And even people no one cares about like Gilby Clarke and Matt Sorum are nice to it. I mean, it says something when some of these tracks actually made it into the set list on their farce of a reunion tour. And in the years since this album, Guns N' Roses, in my opinion, have basically been existing off their legacy. Axl tried to reinvent the band and cement the new lineup as just as valid as the original, but it backfired spectacularly, only reinforcing the idea that Axl is a control freak who pushes everyone away. In fact, after the Chinese Democracy Tour, which lasted a fucking decade, the band went on a tour that only consisted of small clubs and theaters. Which, sure, it was called the Up Close and Personal Tour, which, that was the whole idea of it, I know, but the band could only do that when they were Axl and the Roses. Ever since the band took off back in the day, they could play anywhere, no matter how big, and sell it out. Sure, they might do a little club show here or there, but it was never the focus of an entire tour, and ever since Duff and Slash has returned, they've been back to only the biggest arenas and stadiums. I remember there being talk of them making a sequel to Chinese Democracy, which would have been hilarious, and also lots of talk of new music in general. Tommy Stinson said that he played a big part in keeping the peace and working on musical ideas with most members, and eventually it just became too much for him to handle, so he left. And apparently he didn't even have any problems with Axl like a lot of people do. It just got tiring for him to be the general, like Axl called him, of such a huge band with so many contrasting personalities. This became a problem during the Use Your Illusion era when Axl hired Dizzy Reed, but by the 2010s, it got ridiculous. I mean, look at this lineup photo. You can tell by looking at pictures of the band that something was up. No one fits. They don't look like a band, they just look like a group of random people. And that was the end of that. The band reunited, kinda. Their last tour did record numbers for them, and people are enjoying the reinvigorated band. And Slash even commented that new music might be abound. But since the last album took so long to make, I wouldn't hold my breath. And Chinese Democracy still has fans today. Though many do hate it, I recently did my own poll on my YouTube community tab just to see how my audience feels about it, and woof. It's been about as long since it came out as it took to make. And if nothing else, one thing we can all agree on, it could have been much worse. But that's just my opinion. Tell me what you think below in the comments. Click right here for more metal and hard rock videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to remain notified and to support the channel. But anyways, take it easy, party people.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.